So hello everyone, this is Volker speaking. I hope I come across well with the audio part on the stream. Thanks Sabine for the introduction. Thank you Peter for playing the ball about wdi5. It's not wdi5 because nobody can pronounce the W all the time, so we decided to pronounce it wdi5. And as Sabine already said, it's about testing hybrid UI5 apps in the native or on the native platform. What you can expect today is, of course, some practice and live demo. So you'll see how the whole thing works. And the main player here in the field is going to be Dominik. So I'm just sort of the co-pilot here, giving you the theory introduction. Before we start that, there's supposed to be a poll running throughout the entire presentation, because we're really interested on how you approach hybrid UI5 apps, whether you use them at all, whether you build them at all, whether they're not interested to you, whether you switch to the mobile frameworks that SAP also offers, so on and so forth. But of course, it was already mentioned, we're from j&s-soft, both Dominik and me, and we're a specialized tech and innovation consultancy doing mainly SAP work. We're 34 people and we have a really cool retro office in Heidelberg, which you're very well invited to once you're there. And without further ado, let me hand it over briefly to Dominik to introduce himself.
Hello, my name is Dominik. I'm a senior software engineer at j&s-soft located in Heidelberg. My professional focus is mostly on SAP technologies. My first touch with UI5 was already in mid-2014. Time flies. Since then, I worked amongst other technologies and frameworks on multiple core applications with and without UI5, which led me to create wdi5.
And this is me. My name was mentioned several times, Volker Buzek. And without further ado, let's jump in. Why wdi5? So the initial situation was like this. We have a UI5 code base that gets deployed as an iOS application, as an Android application, and as a desktop application. And I know there's, of course, the SDK for iOS, there's the SDK for Android, there's the mobile SDK. But the simple truth is nobody wanted to drive that amount of investment into the product we were developing. So we were, in order to allow us to use each and every framework to re-implement the same functionality. So it was very clear from the very beginning during that product development, we had to use the same code base and deploy it cross-platform, cross-media. From the very beginning, not only let's say to safeguard the investments, but also to safeguard the functionality. We at j&s start very early in the development process with introducing tests. Mostly for this product because it combines a lot of stacks, and we needed to make sure that the whole end-to-end functionality remains in place and we don't catch ourselves some regressions further down the road once we add new functions or functionality. So from the very beginning, we looked at the tests. We looked at UI5 as a natural thing to run the tests, but pretty soon approached the point where it was not possible for us to actually run the application on their native platforms with the help of UI5. So not the web application on iOS, on Android, but the real deployed build application. And then it became obvious pretty early, we need to roll our own. And when that decision was made to roll our own framework for running hybrid UI5 tests or hybrid UI5 or testing hybrid UI5 apps, and there were a couple of points that we looked at. For example, from the very beginning, we wanted to use the same tests written once and then running on each platform. So running on iOS, running on Android without the need of adjusting the test code itself to run on each platform. So that was one prerequisite. Then we wanted to reuse known UI5 testing paradigms. In the mobility team at j&s, we're pretty fluent with QUnit, with OPA5, with UI5, and we wanted to reuse this, of course, in our new framework. So the locators, the concept of actions, the concept of matches, so on and so forth. Then, as I said already in the beginning, it was a prerequisite also to test in the target medium. So we wanted to test the actual binaries running on devices, on emulators, and not the web app code, so the UI5 code itself. And last but not least, but in principle most important, was the fact that we said, okay, when we roll our own test framework, when we roll our own solution, we wanted from the very beginning to make it so that we would reuse it across several applications in our own development process with multiple products, also in a way that we liked using it. You know how it is with several test frameworks. Sometimes you feel like, okay, it's a burden to use it. Now we wanted to make it differently. We wanted to eat our own dog food. So the framework we build, we'd like to use it all the time in order to identify weak points and also good points. And once all those criteria were listed and we decided on how to approach it, we created wdi5. And if you look at how wdi5 locates itself in the testing pyramid, it pretty much covers things from the integration tests upwards. If you look at the left side, that's the well-known tooling framework so far. You have QUnit, you have OPA5, you have wdi5 with the focus on the browser. Now on the other side, on the right side, it's wdi5 with a clear focus on running the tests on the native platforms, Android, iOS, and Electron as the desktop part. It is also, or you can also see on this slide, the browser somewhat tinted, which means the recommended development approach for using wdi5 is use the browser as a vehicle, as a utility of sorts to develop the tests quickly, because you can do that. Dominik will tell you how this works and show you how this works pretty soon. And then once you have developed the tests, run them on their native containers. So the browser is nothing more, or is only a utility of sorts to develop the tests, but the clear focus of running the tests is on the native platforms. And that's about it for the theory part. I know you guys want to see stuff, you want to see code, so that's it from me so far. I'll hand it over to Dominik for all the details.
Yeah, I'm going to proceed with a quick overview about what's in the package of wdi5 and what's not. We run WebDriver IO version 6. It's a cross-browser and mobile automation test framework for Node.js. We use the wdi.io test runner to solve the problem of having UI5 in sync with test on devices. Appium is a part of the framework. It drives native hybrid and mobile web apps using an enhanced WebDriver protocol. Furthermore, Electron enables the execution of cross-platform development applications using Chrome driver, other drivers like Safari driver, and Node. wdi5 gives the ability to take screenshots. It's already quite simple with wdi.io, but we enhance the functionality to wait to the UI5 lifecycle before taking any screenshots to make sure that the page is fully loaded, binding is executed, which enables then you as a user to run visual regression tests in your application. To fully test a native Cordova application, you need to mock we wanted to mock the plugins. So just in case you don't know about the Cordova plugin architecture, these plugins provide the native functionality like Touch ID storage to the web app. wdi5, which we have here on the slide on the right side, uses the sub-UI test record replay API to interact with the browser and the UI5 controls. The selectors, it's a kind of reuse of the OPA5 and UI5 known selectors and like already explained, it awaits the UI5 lifecycle to make sure all elements are ready to use. Now we have a quick look under the hood, how it's working. On the left side, you can see the Node.js test context, where you write your test cases. It's connected via the browser.execute async API from WebDriver. On the right side, this is the context, the JavaScript context of the application under test. And if you write your test case, you just call the browser.asControl function provided by wdi5. This is going to instantiate the class of wdi5, goes into the browser where this function of wdio calls the record replay API to return an element ID, which then can be reused in a second step, where you can call like sub-UI control compatible API, for example, get property on the instance of the wdi5 object to return then the property value, for example, like get text, get aggregation, to your test case, and then run some assertions on it. Now it's time for a live demo. Going to start a screen share. I'm going to show the application which we are going to test real quick. We have here the Android simulator, some terminals, and iOS simulator. Going to open the application. This application is based on Peter's and Volker's ecosystem showcase application, enhanced by one feature, Touch ID security authentication. This is the first test we are going to run.
Dominik, I'm not sure whether you're sharing your screen actually.
Oh, sorry. Thanks. Now this time?
Yep, now it looks good.
Okay, then we go back a step. Press cancel. So we have the application under test here on our iOS simulator. It's the, like I said, the demo application enhanced by one feature, the authentication feature, which pops up as a native plugin when I press this button over here. Would like to have some passcode. This is just a demo, so we don't have any validations. And when I press done, we see the authentication successful. This is going to be our first test. Then we have a little interaction with the application by pressing this button, changing the view to the other view. And in the third test, we're going to validate the aggregation and the items in the aggregation. Now I would like to give a quick overview about the file structure. We have our GitHub repository of wdi5 over here. For this demo, we just see the test folder because we're basically just executing tests. In this plugins folder, we do have some mocked plugins. This plugin fingerprint AIO, this is what we're going to use to mock, or where I'm going to show the mock and then we use the mock. In the screenshots folder, you can already see 2 screenshots. This is something we have a look on. And then finally, in this UI5 application folder, this is the web app, like known from every regular UI5 application, and the E2E test folder, which contains our tests. In the root of this UI5 application, the configuration files for WDIO should be located. We have this split up for different platforms. Going to have a look on the WDIO iOS configuration. So here from line 2, from line 2 to line 20, you can see the standard WDIO configuration, nothing special over there. All of the WDIO and Appium configuration is available to you. And speaking of Appium, this is the Appium configuration which we use, or which is needed to run the iOS simulator. All standard. Then we have the wdi5 configuration. As you can see, you can specify a screenshot path. We need 2 more information about the device you're running your tests on. It's a device type called native or web to distinguish between native, in here we talk about Android and iOS, or web when we talk about Electron and native browser tests. Platform is iOS, of course, can be Android, Electron, or browser. The plugins over here, it's the mocks for the plugins. So the plugins are regularly running in Cordova, and this is the mock configuration for these. You can see here our already talked about fingerprint plugin with our custom mock implementation located in this path. It's part of our application under test, basically. And to get wdi5 up and running, we use the hooks of WDIO, where we need to require the index file, which is in your case, or should be in your case, the just regular require statement. And then we're going to execute the constructor function with our driver, because we have an iOS application over here. It's called driver, not browser, but it's provided by Appium, and it's basically the same in the end for native devices. And we need a context, since it can be dynamically for Appium. We need to switch context from web to native to take screenshots, for example. And then in the last line, we have an logger output. We provide our own logger to deconvolute the terminal. Then I would like to start with some code. This is a regular test file. What we're going to test is we're going to take a screenshot. We use the plugin mock, so I'm not going to write it, but I'm going to explain it. We're going to test the interaction by this button press, and we're going to test the control aggregation. The screenshots, this is something I would like to take before and after each test execution. To do so, I get the wdi5 object. We have some utils in there. Part of the utils is the screenshot function, and I say take screenshot, and I put a name in here. Oh, it's missing the dots. Just using this name. And then we can assume before each and after of these tests, which I'm going to run, is a screenshot taken. Same, already have coded it for the after each with the specific names. Going to see this in the file structure quite soon. There's some more name handling going on. And then, as explained, I would like to show the fingerprint plugin mock. So we have this file over here. It's the file reference in the configuration. This is the mock for the plugin. We have a self-executing module over here to start this register function. Right when the module is loaded, it's loaded based on the file path you provide in the configuration. Executes the register function, calls a factory function for all these plugins. The plugin needs to register itself with its name, with its used name, like you can see it here, for each platform separately with a function, but the function can be the same under certain circumstances. This is because some of the plugins might have on different platforms different implementations. So we want to make sure we can have or can handle different implementations for each platform. And executed is the setup function, which is going to be injected into your browser application, into your browser in the application under test. And all it does, it's basically overwriting one of these, or it's overwriting all these functions you provide in here of the Cordova plugin, and then just returns some kind of dummy, everything what you implement there. So you get, without any interaction with the phone or simulator, you get the output you need to continue the test case. So the implementation looks like that to use this plugin mock. First of all, we're going to get a configuration from our wdi5 config. This time we need the device type. Since this plugin is just available for Android and iOS, we check the device type. If it's native, then we can make sure it's not running on any system where the plugin is not available. Use the button selector, just a regular selector. Probably have seen it from UI5 or OPA5. We get the control as with the S control function by selector. We press the button. So then we expect already this little boo pop-up shows up. We create a text selector with the path to the model. Get the control as the message and compare it to the expected output to the authentication successful. And with this, I would like to run my first demo. Left side, the Android simulator, and I do have 4 terminals over here. It's start the Android test, start the iOS test, and 2 Appium servers just to run both tests in parallel. So what you can see here is it's starting up WDIO Android. It's running via Appium, starts the application after reinstallation. There's some configuration output from wdi5 over here. It's not going to happen since the logger is configured differently for iOS. It's not going to show up for iOS. And then we can see our spec output, the name of the file, the test case which ran, and since I do have skip on these 2 other tests, it's skipped. And what we were able to see that the pop-up is not showing up because the function is mocked and there's no call to the native context. So then I would like to continue to implement the button press with you. To do so, we also need a selector, but this time I'm going to use a properties selector. It's called properties, have the selector, its icon. We would like to specify the button by the icon. More, we need the view name, which is in this case test.sample.view.main. And last but not least, control type, which is sub.m.button. So we have the selector. Next is we would like to retrieve via the wdi5 browser.as control function. With the selector, we just coded the button, which is then an wdi5 object, the instance of the name class, with the API, with the similar standard API of the functionality of an UI5 control. So we expect after this test case ran to be on the next page, the other page. I'd like to make sure that this runs fine. First test runs, the boom message, authentication successful. So our plugin mock worked, and it jumps to the next page, done. To be honest, this is not a regular test. This is just an interaction for demonstration purpose. So the third part is for the test of the arrays. To test these, I do have a static array over here with all names, which I expect to be in the list. Remove the skip. The list selector is already created. And now with this list selector, I would like to retrieve an array of items. Going to use the browser.as control function again with the selector. And then I can directly, because the return value is an wdi5 control, I can directly call the get aggregation function. And the aggregation, which I would like to retrieve of this list, is, of course, items. With these items, I'm going to check the length to be equal the same length as my static array. And I would like to check each of the names to be each of the items of the list, the property title to be the same as the list of my names in my static array. So this time, going to run the test again. I'm also going to, for demo purposes, run the iOS test in parallel. iOS tests, they run a little longer. The Appium server seems to be a little slower. We were able to see here for iOS as well that the application is started up and reinstalled for each test. And what we can see for Android here is this third test also passed. And I would like to note over here all the outputs, calls of wdi5, caller function get property returned, and then any name, because in the last part, I would like to copy paste some code for this part. What I'm going to do is I do have a logger statement over here. I get the list selector, or I get the list again with the same selector and the items. I save it in a new variable and I expect the variable again, the items length again to be same as my static array. Would like to showcase here. We have a look on iOS test is still running. I would like to showcase here the output. Test runs. You can see all the output for each element which gets retrieved. And then after our log statement appeared, first aggregation done, start execution second, wdi5 outputs, it's really using the internal control with an ID. So it's taking the control ID, saves it into our test context to not, so we prevent the need to jump into the browser context, which is very performance intensive, and reuse the same control which was already retrieved for the second time. Now, last part is what I, to be honest, forgot to showcase, to show you all the screenshots which were taken during our run. For example, here we have the Android screenshot. It's the date, name of the platform under test, and the provided name. It's the after test, and we do have also the before tests where you can see the not authenticated message before the first plugin test, and as well the authentication successful message after the test. So it is more or less the proof that the await cycle for UI5 is working. Since authentication successful, we saw this is a binding path. So binding is already successful executed. That said, I would like to jump back to the screens, to the presentation, and hand over to Volker.
Yeah, which is the handover to me. Thanks, Dominik. So that's the last slide already, and then we're open for questions, or if not, at least open for a sip of beer before the next session. Of course, as any testing framework or any testing approach, wdi5 has its pros and cons. And to start with the cons, it was obvious that the one-time setup that you need to do in order to get the native tests running is quite complex. So as much as we'd like it to be plug and play, you have to honestly admit it's a setup effort. So even though it's, I think, doable for everyone who's, somewhat into the testing and mobile world, no problem, but still can be a bit overwhelming in the beginning. At the same time, we tried in the GitHub repo to describe the setup process in as much detail as possible, but still there's no denying the fact there's a complexity involved in setting things up. Then you could also see that those tests are resource intensive. So doesn't matter whether you have the actual device plugged into a laptop or machine, or whether you're running the simulator. It's a matter of fact that those tests tend to run a lot longer than browser-based tests. And per itself, it's nothing bad. That's just the way it is, and I don't think there's any way around it. But still, it's important to mention. Coming to the pros, it's cross-platform. I mean, Dominik demonstrated it with Android and iOS. You could see that it was the very, very same test code running on both platforms. And due to the fact that we are reusing locators, matchers, and already a quite large portion of the regular UI5 API on controls, the onboarding should be pretty seamless for everyone using it. So you saw the browser object that's provided by wdio as the entry point, and you call .asControl with your selector, and the asControl is API equivalent to UI5. And then once you have the control, you can issue all kinds of methods from regular UI5 control on that object, like get aggregation, like get text, like press, so on and so forth. And of course, Dominik didn't showcase it, but he mentioned it several times. wdi5 is a plugin of sorts, or a wrapper, however you want to call it, to wdio. So you have all the power of wdio also available for any kind of specific interaction with your application that you want to run that's outside of the wdi5 scope. So it's not wdi5 or, it's not an either or wdio, it's wdi5 plus wdio, including the nice expects that Dominik already demonstrated for assertions. The only thing left to say then is you can try it out yourself. So the GitHub repository is public since already from the very beginning. It's available as an NPM package too. And as Dominik introduced in the beginning, we're using wdi5 to test wdi5. So we have a regular UI5 app based on the UI5 ecosystem showcase in the repository. We're building the application on the fly, the hybrid application, and we're running tests for that hybrid application with the help of wdi5. So that's all for now. Overall, I think wdi5 is in a good beta state. When it's going to be production ready, I don't really know. We'll just continue developing it, and we're of course we eagerly await contributions and also comments on that. I think it could be very helpful for all of you developers out there. I could see in the poll that was running next to our presentation that there definitely is an interest in UI5 hybrid apps, even though there's also people who say they're not going to do it or not going to do it with Cordova in the answers. But still, a matter of fact is it's a thing, and we hope that wdi5 helps you with the thing. Okay, thanks for listening.
Thanks, Volker. Thanks, Dominik. That was really interesting. And actually, there was a lot of going on in the chat, and they were talking about the BeAware license. So what's up with the derived BeAware license?
Yeah, this is especially for all you middle management out there who's afraid of open sourcing stuff. We put it under a totally whacked up license just to show it's possible. And the BeAware license essentially means use it, do whatever you want with it, but pay us in beers if you see us. So either Dominik or me. And by the way, pay Maxime a beer too, because he was the one pointing us to the record replay API, and he provided guidance and feedback. And also pay your stuff to Peter, please, who is also an initiator of many of those ecosystem activities going on. And so Maxime, Peter, Dominik, or me, you need to pay up your beers.
Thanks. So one more mystery solved. As far as I can see, there's one more question in the questions pod. Is there any possibility to make end-to-end tests with an SAP backend, including SAP GUI, by only using one application?
Well, there's a lot of details in one question.
Yes.
I can only say that wdi5 is specifically tailored towards interacting with the application. And whether the application connects to a backend or not is entirely up to the application and up to the developer. So look at wdi5 as your digital companion operating the app and making sure that things work.
Great, thanks. And does wdi5 work on real devices?
Yes, it does. It is, as we said, a plugin or wrapper or sitting on top of WDIO. So once you get your actual devices connected to the machine that wdi5 runs on, you should be able to connect or to run your tests on the actual device. What we are currently evaluating, and I hope we'll be able to do soon, is connected to a device cloud, such as Browser Stack or Sauce Labs. And then we have that off of our plate, because that, of course, is a thing running the application, especially in the iOS universe with all its security restrictions for tests.
Thank you. And as we have some more time left, let's do one more question. What's the recommended development approach for, do you want to always run it in various simulators at the same time?
You can if you really have the new Mac Pro going or so, with a lot of computing power. But as I said, it's resource intense running the tests. So what we frequently do is we run the tests, or while we write the tests, we run them in the browser first, because the lifecycle and turnaround time for running the test is much quicker than on the emulators or even on real devices. And then once the test is written in the way we want it to behave, then we run it actually on the emulators or devices. So develop the tests with the help of the browser and then run the tests in their native environments.
Great. Thanks a lot. And thanks for opening UI5Con with the guest presentations today.